But our next guest is past District Governor Rod Funderburk. Rod is a member of the Rotary Club of Lake Murray-Irmo. He's served Rotary District 7770 in various capacities, including District Governor in 2015 and 2016. He's currently Vice President of the Card Fund, an organization focused on finding a cure for Alzheimer's disease. And I'm sure all of you know, it was a homegrown little project starting in the Sumter Club, I believe, in our district. So without further ado, Rod Funderburk.
Rod, we can't hear you.
How about that?
Good.
Well, good afternoon. I'm here to talk a little bit about Alzheimer's. And we'll start with what it is and what it is not. It is not an infection. It is not something you get from being exposed to an Alzheimer's patient. It's a genetic brain disease. It causes problems with memory, thinking, behavior. People who experience it on different levels. It attacks people in different ways. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the different ways going down the road here. Alzheimer's is a very progressive disease. It affects memory. Typically, it progresses and gets worse and worse as it progresses, and there's no cure. It was discovered in 1906 by Dr. Alois Alzheimer. He had a patient named Auguste, and she was admitted to the hospital in Frankfurt, Germany in 1901. She had a number of issues, including memory loss and cognitive issues, and they treated her unsuccessfully for 5 years, and she died. Once she died, they did a brain autopsy and discovered that in her brain, she had tau tangles and amyloid beta plaques. Those two items have become the markers for Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Alzheimer's wrote a paper in a medical journal, and that's why the disease is named for him. Essentially, amyloid beta plaque and tau tangles attack the connectors in the brain. The connectors is what sends signals from one part of the brain to another, sends signals from the brain to parts of the body. And as these connectors are destroyed, the brain shrinks. So the brain on my left is a healthy brain. The brain on my right is an Alzheimer's brain. This is simply a scan of a tau tangle under a microscope. This is probably my favorite slide of the entire presentation. It's black and white. If you look at the square up near the top right that's outlined in red, that is a healthy brain. The black marks are representatives of the connectors in your brain. We have millions and millions of neurons that connect parts of the brain. Healthy brains look like what's in that little red box. An Alzheimer's brain is what's in the larger box to the left. After the connectors have been destroyed, there's fewer and fewer of the little black boxes. Think of your cell phone. I'm sure every one of you on this call has a cell phone. You make calls on your cell phone. You get data on your cell phone. You transfer information on your cell phone. And everything works wonderfully as long as there are towers to carry that information. If one or more towers is damaged, you probably won't even notice. It might just slow down the data transfer, but you'll still go through. If a bunch of the towers are out of service, your call will not go through, your data will not get transferred. That's essentially what happens in the brain. When the first couple of neurons are destroyed, no big deal. When a whole bunch of these neurons are destroyed, you begin cognitive issues, you have memory loss, your brain quits sending signals to various parts of your body, and things begin to go downhill quickly. Think for a minute about the last time you had a meal. You sat at a table, food in front of you, and you needed to get the food from the plate to your mouth. Your brain told your hand to pick up the fork. Your brain then told your hand to move the fork towards your mouth. Your brain told your mouth to open. Anytime there's signal problems, none of that would have happened smoothly. This is simply a scan of a healthy brain on my left and an Alzheimer's brain on the right. Alzheimer's is one of the many dementia-related illnesses. Alzheimer's has the largest number of patients, followed by Lewy body dementia. It's the 6th leading cause of death. And that's only important in terms of the other 5 all have cures, or if caught quickly enough, they have preventions. Alzheimer's has neither. There is neither a prevention nor a cure. Would you volunteer for Alzheimer's? And the answer is absolutely not. But 1 in 11 men and 1 in 6 women can look forward to Alzheimer's during their lifetime. And unfortunately for the ladies, when you have Alzheimer's, it's typically much more aggressive than the men. Alzheimer's is not an infection. It's a genetic disease. And each of us gets genes from our mom and genes from our dad. An APOE is one of the genes discovered by Alzheimer's research, and it comes in 3 versions, an APOP2, 3, and 4. And if you get a 4 from both your parents, you have 10 times the likelihood to have Alzheimer's as those folks who got no 4s from either parent. If you got 1 4, you have 4 times the likelihood of getting Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a very expensive disease. We spend a great deal more every year than we did. Every year we spend more money on disease patient care. We spend $300 billion with a B on caring for Alzheimer's patients. Now that is only the money spent by the government through Medicaid and Medicare or the private insurance companies. That is not what is spent by patients or families out of pocket. And of the $300 billion spent on care, we only spend $3 billion on research. There's another cost of Alzheimer's, and that has to do with the patient caregivers. Caregivers are 45% more likely to die before the patient because of stress-related illnesses. There are currently 6 million Alzheimer's patients in the US. Every one of those folks has a family. Every one of those folks has some kind of caregiver. We need to find a cure so caregivers and families don't have to go through this. I'll bet you if I could see all of you at this point and you raise your hand, I bet you most of you would raise your hand to say you've been touched by Alzheimer's disease, either through a friend, a relative, member of your family. Let me tell you about 2 friends of mine. One's named Joe Bearden. He actually worked for me for a while. He was a brilliant engineer, built chemical plants all over the world. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at age 70. He died at age 77. An extremely aggressive form of Alzheimer's. In fact, the last 3.5 years of his life, he knew nobody. He couldn't recognize his family, his daughters, his wife, his friends, nobody. He was in a shell. A second friend named Jim Zoller. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 78, died at 94. He had a very slow growing Alzheimer's. In fact, he could recognize his wife and children all the way up until 6 months before he died. What Alzheimer's did to him was it changed his personality. He went from a very caring, loving, gentle gentleman to an aggressive, abusive, very aggravating person. And I point those out in terms of, we know from research there's at least 3 kinds of Alzheimer's disease. There's an aggressive form, there's a mild form, and one in the middle, which says to me, when we find a cure, we got to have more than one cure because one size will not fit all. We're looking for a puzzle piece, basically, a piece that will fit the puzzle, that will give us what we need to finally find a cure. Research is very interesting. And that's what CART Fund's all about. We fund research. The CART Fund paid for the research that led to the discovery of the mutation APOE3 that I just talked about a little while ago. CART Fund funded research that in 2007 found us a means of having a live diagnosis of Alzheimer's. Prior to that, you couldn't diagnose for sure until you were dead and had an autopsy. In 2008, research paid for by the CART Fund discovered an eye test that can confirm Alzheimer's. Research paid for by the CART Fund has discovered that the drug STX, which is a substitute for estrogen, when used in mice with Alzheimer's, can improve behavioral issues and improve memory. It has not gone through a medical clinical test for human beings yet, but we're hopeful that it'll be useful in the future. Our brain comes with a brain barrier. We're designed so that drugs cannot get into your brain and harm you. But research has found a way to get through that barrier. So if we ever discover a drug that will help with Alzheimer's, we can get it into the brain at this point. Research tells us that Alzheimer's begins damaging the brain some 20 plus years before the first symptom shows up. And so we need to find a cure and find it early. This is Roger Ackerman. He actually started the CART Fund in 1995. Member of the Rotary Club of Sumter. He brought a project to his club. Many of you have brought projects to your club, or you've sat on the board and listened to projects. His project was fairly simple in concept, difficult to implement. You asked the Rotary Club of Sumter members to come on Monday to lunch and empty the change from their pockets. Nobody has change in their pockets anymore. But back in 1995, people had change in their purses and their pockets. The club was to accumulate the change, and when enough was accumulated, give it away as a grant to fund research. The CART Fund was born in 1995. In 1999, we had raised $100,000 and gave a grant to Dr. Alan Levy of the Emory University. Dr. Levy still participates with CART, and his picture will show up shortly. CART is C-A-R-T. C is for coins. It also stands for currency, checks, credit cards, whatever we'll spend. AR is Alzheimer's research. That is the only thing the CART Fund does. We don't do education. We don't do caregivers support. We only fund research. T is for trust. We're a 501(c), and 100% of Alzheimer's donations go to research. Every single dollar you give goes into research. We can say that with a straight face because A, we have very little admin cost. We only pay for printing, website maintenance, and banking fees. There's no high salaries, there's no buildings to rent. But we have a separate 501(c) that covers the administration. And if you donate into the blue bucket, 100% of that goes into research. So how is CART different? We're different because we're seed funding. We want to fund researchers who are thinking out of the box, researchers who have potentially successful research, but they've not yet proven their hypothesis. If you go to the three big funders, the National Institute of Health, the pharmaceutical companies, or the government, they all require that you have a proven hypothesis. And we fund those folks who have not yet proven their hypothesis so that they can go and get additional funding. We've given away $9.2 million over our history, 55 grants. Of those 55 grants, 46 of those have gotten multiple millions of dollars to extend their research. The grant process is fairly simple. In the fall, we send letters to institutions asking them to participate in the grant process. They submit letters of intent before Christmas. In the spring, we go through those and ask for additional information to the ones that are potentially inviting. We make a decision in April and give the money away the first week of May. This is our grant review panel. Dr. Gary Goforth is the chair of the panel. The other three are renowned researchers. They're very successful researchers. They volunteer their time without pay to go through all the potential research and tell us who can provide the best avenue for success. As of last May, we've given away $9.2 million. We would like to give away $1 million again this year. However, the pandemic has been a little difficult because clubs are not meeting sometimes, and the ones that are meeting hybridly. So returns are not seeing the blue buckets as often as they used to. So at this point, we've only raised $910,000 toward our $1 million goal. Rotarians can make a difference. So how can you help? Well, as the president-elect, I'm going to ask you today to appoint a CART fund liaison for your club. That would be the person who would promote CART for your club and help your club recognize how to give money through the blue buckets. You can also promote the CART fund through the podium. And I don't mean stand up there and say, don't forget the CART fund and move on. I mean, actually promote it from the podium. You can hold a fundraiser for CART. You can support the district CART, the district golf tournament, June the 11th. The recipients of the funding from that tournament will be Holio and CART. You can individually contribute through the portal, or you can actually write a check and mail it to this address. You can help us find a cure. Our entire goal is to find a cure for Alzheimer's. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Rod. Again, just a reminder, if you have some more interest in the subject and you have